Story 1.
For several years, I owned a house I'd been renting out on Airbnb. At first, the idea was exciting. Airbnb had the potential to bring in more than a regular lease, especially since our location was prime for tourists. My wife and I felt like we'd stumbled upon a winning venture, but as bookings increased, so did the demands. Scheduling guests, coordinating cleaning, and promptly handling messages became a second job in itself. We managed for a couple of years without issue, until the night when a young couple, so I thought, booked our place, only to turn our routine into something far darker. As usual, I texted them the door code when they arrived and got the usual all good response. Since I rarely saw guests face to face, I settled back, ready to enjoy my evening. But at around 9 p.m., just as I was winding down for bed, I received a text from the young man staying there, followed by a phone call. Instinctively, a strange feeling crept over me. He claimed the house had no water. Apologizing, though puzzled by the issue, I offered to come by immediately to check it out and arrange repairs for the morning. He was polite and agreed, so I headed over, despite a nagging sense of unease. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed 2 cars parked outside. That struck me as odd. They were supposed to be a couple, and it was just a one-night stay. I brushed it off, figuring they'd had a visitor, even if that wasn't exactly allowed. I knocked, unlocked the door with the code, and stepped inside. But the house was silent, no sign of the guests. I should have searched for them, but I was tired and focused on solving the water issue quickly. Heading to the basement to check the main water valve, I found everything in order. Then I turned the valve and a rush of water surged back through the pipes. It dawned on me that the valve had been deliberately shut off. Standing alone in that basement, a chill crept up my spine. Someone had cut the water themselves, likely to lure me here. But why? Uneasy, I decided to leave and call the guests back from the safety of my car. I turned to leave when I heard the basement door creak open, followed by footsteps, more than one set, descending toward me. 3 men appeared, each older than the supposed young man on the booking. "Is it fixed?" one asked, his voice matching that of the man on the phone. They stood watching me, unblinking, an uncomfortable silence hanging between us. Forcing a calm response, I said it was all working now, chalking it up to a tight valve, not wanting to point fingers. I edged toward the stairs, my gaze catching on a gun tucked into the waistband of the man closest to me. My heart raced, but I managed to keep my composure, moving between them and up the stairs without looking back. They remained in the basement as I hurried to my car and drove off, the image of that gun imprinted in my mind. When I got home, I woke my wife and relayed what had happened. She urged me to call the police, and after some hesitation, I did. 20 minutes later, an officer called back, saying there was no sign of anyone inside. I provided the door code, and he called again after another sweep of the house, confirming it was empty. The next day, we discovered that the credit card used to book the place was stolen, and several valuable items were missing. It turned out there was never a young couple at all. The whole situation left me with questions, especially about their plan with the water. Maybe they'd hoped I'd waive the charge, letting them stay under the radar with the stolen card, or perhaps they'd intended to confront me with that gun. But why didn't they? 3 men blocking my exit in a dim basement, each armed with a chilling calm, and they just let me go. It never added up. After that, I never visited the property while guests were staying, and within a few months, we left Airbnb behind and rented the place long-term.
Story 2.
Last year, I found myself nestled in a quaint 2-bedroom Airbnb, a brief interlude during my vacation. This charming little spot served as a temporary layover on my way to another rental, meant primarily for a restful night rather than an extended stay. As I stepped inside, the pristine emptiness met my expectations. Everything was tidily arranged and still. I took a leisurely stroll through the house, absorbing the surroundings before lugging in my bags and plopping down on the couch. The clock probably read around 8 p.m. at that hour. As I started to drift off, the abrupt ringing of the doorbell snapped me back to reality, sending a shock of adrenaline coursing through my veins. My gaze darted toward the front door, a swirl of confusion and unease taking hold. As a petite young woman, I was all too familiar with the feeling of vulnerability, particularly when confronted with strangers at night. With hesitant steps, I approached the door, straining to catch the faint whispers of 2 men on the other side. Lacking any sort of safety lock, I kept the door shut firmly and called out, "Hello? Hey, we're here for the Airbnb. Can you let us in?" A man's voice rang through the wood. A perplexed frown creased my brow as I shouted back, seeking clarity on their cryptic request. He explained that he had a reservation for the night. Alarm bells rang in my mind. This had to be a mix-up. I yelled that I too had a booking and urged him to reach out to the owner for clarification. His displeasure was palpable, and honestly, I couldn't blame him if he felt frustrated. I heard one set of footsteps retreat, but the other man persisted, requesting again that I open the door for a conversation. As I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob, I felt an odd mixture of trust and instinct telling me to tread carefully. "My husband will be down shortly to sort this out," I replied, hoping to project the illusion that I wasn't alone, wanting to catch them off guard if their intentions turned sinister. Silence hung in the air. After a moment of tense waiting, I cautiously drew back a small curtain and peered through the narrow window. The man I had spoken to stood by his vehicle, facing it, but what caught my eye beyond him was one of the most chilling sights I could imagine. A group of 5 shadowy figures lingered further down the driveway, half concealed as if poised for an unspoken cue. Their faces obscured by coverings, I could only guess that more were hiding just out of sight. The unsettling reality dawned on me. I was likely surrounded by a gang, given the city's reputation. Terror seized my heart, and I instinctively backed away from the door, desperately trying to steady my breathing. In a whirlwind of panic, I dashed to the bedroom to retrieve my phone and call the police, hearing ominous footsteps echoing around the house. It felt as if a pack of wolves encircled me, ready to pounce at any moment, ready to shatter the peace of the night. Retreating to the bathroom, I dialed 911, striving for a semblance of calm. The operator's voice was soothing yet urgent, advising me to remain quiet and composed as help was dispatched to my location. I clung to the phone, hearing the unsettling shuffle of feet outside until an agonizing crack splintered through the air, the unmistakable sound of wood bending and breaking at the front door. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I stifled my sobs with my hands. I listened in dread as a throng of intruders surged inside, rifling through drawers and closets. One of them approached the bathroom door, jiggling the handle before barking out a command and then wandering off. The chaos continued, each creak and crash fueling my horror, until the distant wail of sirens signaled the arrival of law enforcement, and the intruders fled in a frantic scramble. By the time the police arrived, my belongings had vanished, my luggage taken, and my car lay in ruin, its windows shattered and contents stripped. An officer settled beside me, taking notes and explaining that they had been grappling with a surge of gang-related home invasions lately. He assured me that the culprits were typically more interested in theft than violence, which likely explained why they left me undisturbed in the bathroom, perceiving me as no threat. Still, whether their intentions were malicious or not, the fear lingered. I knew this experience had little to do with my stay at the Airbnb, yet now, each time I book a rental, an unsettling anxiety creeps in, a shadow of that night's terror ever present.
Story 3.
Last year, I ventured on my first solo journey to Salt Lake City. Up until then, vacations were rare for me, and whenever they did come around, they were family affairs. This trip was something entirely new, a chance to savor time by myself, with no one to worry about but me. It might sound strange, but solitude has always been a friend of mine, and I rarely get to embrace it fully. I'd considered hotels, but the Airbnbs seemed surprisingly charming and much more budget-friendly. The more affordable ones, though, were a bit off the beaten path. Since I had my own car, a few extra miles weren't an issue, so I opted for a cozy place with a welcoming kitchen and a snug bedroom. Everything I needed. I pulled up at dawn on Sunday, a quiet hour when the world still felt half asleep. The owner had messaged me the entry code, so I brought in my things, already feeling at ease with the warmth of the space. Compared to the cramped apartment I shared with my roommate, this was practically a sanctuary. After settling in, I sank into the couch, turned on the TV, and let myself unwind, savoring the silence after the 10-hour drive. Fatigue soon won out, and I drifted into a doze, though it was barely past 7 in the evening. I woke a few hours later, the TV's blue glow still illuminating the room. Groggy, I glanced at the clock. It was just past 10. Grabbing the remote, I switched the TV off and headed toward the kitchen for a glass of water. But as I moved, a sharp, icy draft brushed against my skin, stopping me cold. My eyes darted to the side, and there, the front door stood wide open. My heart skipped, and I felt a sudden chill that wasn't just from the cold air. I was sure I'd closed and locked it. Seeing it yawning open was more than unnerving. Stepping cautiously, I edged over to the door, ears straining for any hint of movement inside. I'm not the burliest guy around, but I'm reasonably fit and tall, confident enough unless someone came on. Grabbing a knife from the kitchen, I moved slowly from room to room, my footsteps silent, checking every shadowed corner and darkened nook. The house was empty, but the silence only added to the surreal chill settling over me. Still bewildered, I texted the owner to ask if anyone else was supposed to be around, half hoping for some logical explanation. With it being late, I didn't expect an immediate response. Locking every door meticulously, I checked the house one last time before going to bed, my fatigue slowly reclaiming me. Yet morning greeted me with a renewed unease. A faint noise drifted from outside my bedroom, not from the street, but just beyond the door. Frozen in bed, I waited, heartbeat hammering as I tried to piece together how anyone might have entered. Only the owner and I had the code. The unsettling thought that he might be lurking in his own property crossed my mind. Oddly, that belief gave me courage. Perhaps it was just some twisted voyeuristic habit. Summoning the nerve, I crept out of bed, reaching for my phone on the nightstand to call the police. But my small noise must have tipped off whoever was outside. Footsteps suddenly raced away from my door toward the front of the house. My skin prickled as I realized the intruder had been standing there the entire time, listening in silence. Heart pounding, I dialed 911, clutching the phone as I awaited their arrival. Thankfully, whoever it was had fled by the time the police showed up. After that night, I cut my stay short and checked into a hotel for the remainder of my trip. The owner later refunded me, genuinely worried, and he proved, through receipts and an alibi, that he hadn't been near the property. He was actually a kindly old man, and it became even more chilling to realize that it was a stranger who'd somehow entered that house. To this day, I still don't know how they got in or why they were there. The memory that haunts me most is waking to find the door wide open, knowing now that they'd been watching me as I slept, moving through the house like some shadow. It's left an imprint on my mind, a reason I'll think twice before ever staying alone in an Airbnb again.
Thank you for watching this episode of Scary Stories. I hope you gave this video a like. Subscribe to my channel and watch more horror stories. Click on the next video on your screen.